I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
No, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, science, I leave for life.
Yes, sir.
Talking of the science of life, then, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I noticed from your book that on Thursday evening when Lord Shoreham and Mr. Worthing were dining here, 8 bottles of champagne are arranged as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that in a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
Yes, I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It's not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the good of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
My dear Ernest, how are you? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. Pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it's customary in good society to have some light refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It's excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Neighbours. Neighbours.
You've got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. Shropshire is your county, by the way, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. What are these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yeah, that's all very well, but I don't think Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
Oh, my dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. I mean, it's very romantic to be in love, but I really don't see anything romantic in a definite proposal. You might be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the romance is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I shall certainly try and forget the fact.
No doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce courts are specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no point speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered for Aunt Augusta.
Oh, you have been eating them all this time?
Well, it's quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter's for Gwendolen. She's devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is, too.
Oh, my dear fellow, you needn't eat it as though you were going to eat it all. You behave as though you're married to her already. You are not married to her already, nor do I think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I can allow you to marry her, you are going to have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Lane, bring in the smoking case. Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time we dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you'd let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. It was very nearly offering a large reward.
Yeah, well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no good offering a large reward now the thing is found.
I think that's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now I look at the inscription inside. I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen it with it 100 times, and you've no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
No, it's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. My half of modern culture relies on what we shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of that fact. I don't propose to discuss modern culture with you. It isn't the sort of thing one should discuss in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this is not your cigarette case. You see, this cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone with that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt.
Yes. Charming old lady she is too. Lives in Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to
So
me.
why does she call herself Little Cecily, if she's your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give it back to me.
Why does your aunt call you her uncle, if she is your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
Well, you've always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as though your name was Ernest. You are the most Ernest-looking person I ever met in my life. Perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your business card. Look, here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Ernest, if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Yes, well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Come on, old boy, you much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algernon, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's a very vulgar thing to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Yes, well, that's what dentists always do. Now, come on, tell me the whole thing. I may mention I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you're Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
I'll produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce the explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who refers to me as uncle out of motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives in my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear fellow. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly the place is not in Shropshire.
No, I suspected that. I've bumbried all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. As a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much for one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany, and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That is the whole truth. Pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. And modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte. Don't try it. You'd much better leave that to the people who haven't been at university. They do it so well in the daily papers. No, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you're a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I can go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury's perfectly invaluable. Now, if it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I've not asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, it's extremely careless of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You would much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Tuesday, and once a week is more than enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated like a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know exactly who she'll place me next to tonight. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dining table. It's not pleasant. In fact, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. I mean, the amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands, perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now I know you're a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I may kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of my brother Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with with your invalid friend who has an absurd name.
Nothing would induce me to get rid of Bunbury. And if ever you get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time.
Oh, that is nonsense. I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen. She's certainly the only girl I ever saw in my life I would marry. I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
And your wife will. You don't seem to realise, old man, in married life, 3 is company, 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Oh, for heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's so much beastly competition about. That will be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes to give you an opportunity to propose to Gwendolen, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
But you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Lord Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That is not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon. I felt obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I've never seen a woman look so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cup sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, won't you come and sit here?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them especially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers.
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It matters not, Algernon. I had crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure these days.
Yes, I hear. Her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
Her hair certainly has changed its colour, though from what cause, I of course cannot say. Thank you, Algernon. I have a treat in store for you this evening. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman, so attentive to her husband. It's a delight to watch them.
Yes, I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to forego the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. That will throw my table completely out. And your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's used to that.
Yes, it's a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me, but the fact is, I've just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Bunbury's a dreadful invalid.
But I must say, I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying around with the question is quite absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy for invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness should never be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. It's what I always keep telling your uncle, not that he seems to be taking much notice, not as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should feel much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me if he would be so kind as not to have a relapse on Saturday. But I rely on you to arrange my music for me. One wants something that will inspire conversation, particularly at the end of the season, as everyone will have said everything they wanted to say already, which probably wasn't much.
I will speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the programme I've drawn out if you'd kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That's very kind of you. I'm sure the programme will be delightful after a few exfoliations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they're improper. And I either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. German, on the other hand, sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe it is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something
I
else.
thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
Gwendolen, you really love me.
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else. You really mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Really, Gwendolen, I must say I think there are much nicer other names. I think Jack, for instance, to be a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name of Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and all of them, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman married to a man called John. She might never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know I love you. You, Miss Fairfax, led me to believe that you were not absolutely indifferent towards me.
I adore you. But you have not proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think that would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it's only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I have to say.
Yes, but you do not say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
For my own one, I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderful blue eyes you have, Ernest. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, arise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finish what, May I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come across a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, Mr. Worthing, I have some questions to put to you. And while I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You may have a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Though I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be those that a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A young man should always have an occupation of some kind. London is full of idle young men these days. How old are you?
29.
A good age to be married out. I have always been of the opinion that a man should know either everything or nothing at all. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear that. I disapprove of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. I'm sure if it were to, it would prove a serious danger to the other classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What with the duties expected of one in one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a pleasure or a profit. It serves to give one position, but it prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said for land.
I do have a country house with some land attached to it, of course. Some 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. Indeed, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who really make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up later. You have a town house, I assume? A girl with an unspoiled and simple character, such as Gwendolen's, could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. I can get it back whenever I like, with 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham. I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number, Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. But that too can be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid to say I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
No, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or at least they call round in the evening. Now to minor matters. Are your parents still living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid to say I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost both my parents. It would perhaps be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't really know who I am by birth. I was was found.
Found?
Yes, old Mr. Thomas Cardew, a gentleman of a very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket in his pocket for Worthing at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman, who happened to have a first-class ticket in his pocket for the seaside resort, find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was found in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it. A perfectly ordinary handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this very ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess that I am somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As to the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station may well serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Indeed, it probably has. It can hardly be recognized as the assured basis for a position in society.
Well, may I ask what you would advise me to do, Lady Bracknell? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations of some sort, and to make every effort to try and produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see how I could possibly do that. I can produce a handbag at any moment. I have it in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What is it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I, Lord Bracknell, would allow our daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a castle. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day. Algernon, will you stop playing that ghastly tune? How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know, it's the way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is right, Mr. Truitt. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't actually know what a gorgon is like, but I'm sure that Lady Bracknell is one. At any rate, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't speak of your relations.
No, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge about how to live, or the smallest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue the matter with you. You always want to argue things.
Is that what things were originally made for?
Good heavens, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any possibility of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's it.
Is that clever?
Well, it's perfectly phrased. And quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The whole thing has become a public nuisance. Wish to goodness there are a few fools left.
Oh, there are.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
Fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course. Fools. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Dear young fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a sweet, innocent girl. The extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
Well, the only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty, and to someone else if she's clever.
No, that is nonsense.
But what about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
There's a before the week is out, I'll have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris quite suddenly of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. No, you'd much better say a severe chill.
Are you sure a severe chill isn't hereditary?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest was carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your brother Ernest. I mean, won't she feel his loss of him?
No, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays absolutely no attention whatsoever to her lessons.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I shall take very great care that you never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Oh, does Gwendolyn know that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
My dear fellow, one doesn't blurt these things out. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly likely to be the best of friends. Bet you anything you like that half an hour after meeting each other, they'll be calling each other sister.
Yes, women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we're going to get a good table at Willis's, we really should go and dress. Do you know it's nearly 7?
Oh, but it's always nearly 7.
Yes, well, I'm hungry.
I've never known you when you worked.
What should we do after dinner? Go to the theatre?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
We might go to the club.
I hate talking.
Trot round to the Empire at 10.
No, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
What shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. Mind you, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of it.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly moral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own Gwendolyn.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever held over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and although I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dearest Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character is exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Oh, your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House. Borden, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That will, of course, require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Well,
How long do you remain in town?
till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
Will you allow me to see you to your carriage?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can lay out my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Oh, Lane, you're a perfect prince.
I do my best to give satisfaction.
That's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever really cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will land you in a serious scrape someday.
No, I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
That is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Nobody thinks you ever done. moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We shall repeat yesterday's lesson.
I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is, that you should improve yourself in every way. And he laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving the town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German as he is leaving for town.
Oh, dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I believe he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health. And his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended of one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life, and idle merriment and trivialities would be out of place in his conversation. And you must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
Yes, I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have good influence over him, Miss Prism. Well, I'm sure you certainly would. You know German, and geology, and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. No, I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sowed, so let him reap. Oh, Cecily, I do wish you put your diary away. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. Well, I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I do hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
But the good ended happily, the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. Unfortunately, the manuscript was abandoned.
Oh.
No, I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. But to your work, child. These speculations are proper.
Bless you, dear Dr. Chatterbourne, going up through the garden.
Dear Dr. Chatterbourne, this is indeed a pleasure.
Now, how are we this morning, Miss Prism? You are like just well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. Indeed, I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chatterbourne.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
Oh, I find that very strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bee. Mr. Worthing has not yet, I suppose, returned from town.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Yes, he usually likes to spend his Sunday afternoon in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim in life is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria, my name is Letitia, Doctor.
Yeah, a classical allusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evening.
I think, dear Doctor, I will take a stroll with you. I find that I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the school.
Oh, that would be delightful. Cecily, you shall read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. These metallic matters, they do have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geology, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He's brought the luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Well, did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss, he seemed most disappointed. I told him you were with Miss Prism in the garden. He seemed anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. But I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. Oh, he does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You're under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You I see from your card are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, you must not think that I'm wicked, cousin Cecily. I'm really not with you.
If you're not, then you've certainly been deceiving us all in a most inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been using a double eye, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
Actually, now I come to think about the subject, I've been quite bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, although I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
Yes, I can't understand how you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
Yes, that is a great disappointment to me. I'm obliged to return by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Oh. Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement when one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you should require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you should have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
No, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That's why I want you to reform me. You might make it your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
Oh, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
Which is rather exotic of you. But I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
Oh, that's because I'm hungry.
I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Mind I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Maréchal Niel.
I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it would be right for you to speak to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Miss Prism is a short-sighted old woman. You are the prettiest girl I have ever seen.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
A snare that every sensible man wants to be caught in.
I would like to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. Now, a misanthrope I can understand, but a womanthrope, never.
Well, believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The practice, as well as the precept of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
Obviously, that is the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up until the present day. But what you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, is that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weak vessels astray.
What is a man of equally attractive when married?
A married man is never attractive except to his wife.
Now, Doctor, I have been told not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Now, maturity can always be depended upon, and rightness can be trusted. Of young women agreeing. Now, I was speaking horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits and... well, where is Cecily?
Perhaps she apologized to the schools.
Oh, Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing!
Well, this is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful deaths and extravagance.
Still still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust I will profit by it.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I offer you my most sincere condolences. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest, he had many faults. But it was a sad, sad blow.
Yeah, very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris. I received a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? Oh, I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some very slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, oh, that is a pleasant case, distressing. I have preached at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festival days. The last time I preached it was at the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christening out being Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right. I mean, of course, you are continually christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the dear rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
No, it is not for any child, although I am very fond of children. And the fact is, I'd like to be christened myself this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
That's surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
Do you have any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you feel I'm a little too old now.
No, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
No, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all I think necessary, or indeed advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you like the ceremony performed?
Well, I thought I might trot round about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I had 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying cottages of your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
I don't think it would be much fun to be christened along with the other babies. That would be childish. Would a harvest wife suit you?
Yes, will it be, yes, will it be. No, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into this house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too bowed down by grief. What seems to us to be bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, I'm so glad to see you back. What horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child!
Uncle Jack, I don't relax. Do look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. Can I have such a surprise for you? Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother. Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense, I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't be like that. He may have behaved badly towards you in the past, but he is still your brother. You cannot be so heartless as to disown him. I shall tell him to come out, and we will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we'd all been resigned to his loss, I find his sudden return peculiarly distressing.
My brother in the dining room? I don't know what all this is. It's perfectly absurd.
Good heavens!
Brother John, I've come down from town to say that I'm truly sorry for the trouble I've caused you, and that I intend to lead a much better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take it. I think his coming down here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who goes to visit them. And there must be much good in someone who is kind to an invalid friend and leaves a pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he has been speaking to you of Bunbury, has he?
Yes, Ernest has told me all about poor Miss Bunn and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury? Well, I won't have him talk to you of Bunbury or anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Well, of course, I admit the faults were all on my side, but I must say I find Brother John's coldness towards me peculiarly painful. I'd expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially as this is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think you might leave the two brothers alone.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgment.
I feel very happy.
You scoundrel, Algy! You must get out of this place at once. I don't allow Bunbury in here. Really?
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I believe that's all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage. I unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a hat box, 2 dress cases, and a large luncheon basket.
Yes, I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been called back to town suddenly.
Yes, sir.
Fearful lie you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
Well, I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasure in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to speak of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go up and change? I think it's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for someone who's actually staying with you in your house for a whole week as a guest.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You must leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave you while you're in mourning. That would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you'd stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long about it. Never saw anyone take so long to dress with such little result.
Or at least I'm not always overdressed as you always are.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your embarrassing is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage. And your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to leave by the 4:05 train, and I hope you have a pleasant journey. This bumbering, as you call it, has not been a great success.
Well, I think it's been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. I do need to see her again to arrange another Bunbury. Here she is.
I'm hinting back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from someone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I say quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you'll allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Your diary? I give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it's been informative, I hope we'll all help you. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down confrontation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on, I'm quite ready for more. Please don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently, not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
Oh, I don't think I can be right for you to say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly. hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come back next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody else in the world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Silly boy, of course. You've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Yes, you'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and his prison. And of course, a man who is much talked about is very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you in this very room. The next day I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? Very nice of you.
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I broke off the engagement was so beautiful and so badly spelled. Even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course, on the 22nd of last March. Well, you can read the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather continues. Charming.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing. Cecily, I am very much hurt to hear that you broke it off. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would not have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. Besides, I forgave you before the week was out.
Perfect angel you are.
Dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling. With the help of others.
I'm so glad.
You won't break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think that I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must promise not to laugh at me, darling. But it had always been a girlish dream of mine to fall in love with a man whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. Well, I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
So, my dear child, you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like, dear. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
My own sweet, loving little darling. I don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. I mean, it's not at all a bad name. In fact, it's rather an aristocratic name. Why, half the chaps who end up in the bankruptcy courts are called Algernon. Oh, but seriously, darling. If my name were Algernon, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear that I would not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I assume, fully experienced in the practice of all rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chatterwood is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I see him at once on a most important christening. On most important business.
Oh.
I won't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering we have been engaged since the 14th of February, and I only met you today for the first time, I think it is hard that you should leave for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you leave 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Well, Miss Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, so she states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
No, this he was seen going towards the rectory some time ago.
Now ask Miss Fairfax to come here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, yes.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like ladies who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already, more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time. Oh, pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily now.
Oh, with pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Well, that is all quite settled then, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It's part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother. Nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, along with the assistants of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange, he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How very secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candour, dear Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many very painful examples of what I refer to. Indeed, if it were not so, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother. His elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. Now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Oh, Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship such as ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little country newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, there seems to be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I think there must be some mistake. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel anywhere without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is of any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it were to cause you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has become entrapped into some foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never approach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion such as this, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest to me, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manner. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am very glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, then?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills, quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that very much. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the countryside.
Oh, yes. Flowers are as common here as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody ever does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it a great deal at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
And that's Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my cup with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am renowned for my gentleness of disposition and my extraordinary sweetness of nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of another woman, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I met you, I distrusted you. I felt you to be false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, I'm trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
Dear little Cecily, of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I knew there must be some mistake, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
My own love.
Here is Ernest. A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt that there must be some slight error. The gentleman who is at present embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh. And you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it. I could deny anything if I liked. Well, my name certainly is John. It's been John for years.
Gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn.
You will always call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It's the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. I'm very inexperienced at it. But I will tell you quite frankly, I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I've never had a brother in my life, and I certainly haven't the smallest intention of having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
Yes. It's not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to follow us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bumbering, I suppose.
Yes, the most wonderful Bunbury. It is the most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunbury knows that.
Bunbury's
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you're serious about, I haven't the remotest idea. About everything, I should imagine. You have such an intensely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is your friend Bunbury has been quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to. It's a very good thing it is.
Your brother's looking a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear off to London quite as frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say you're taking in a sweet, innocent girl like that quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Well, I can see no possible defence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There's certainly no chance of your ever marrying Miss Cardew.
There's not much likelihood, dear Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it were my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How can you consider that calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble? I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly harmless.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the one thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. So at the moment I'm eating muffins because I'm unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
I say it's perfectly harmless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
Well, I can only eat them calmly. I can only eat them like this because otherwise I'll get butter on my cup.
Well, there's no reason why you should eat them in that greedy fashion.
Jack, why don't you have a tea cake? I don't like a tea cake.
Oh, good heavens, suppose a man may be able to eat his own muffins in his own garden.
I mean, you just said it was heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly harmless for you under the circumstances. That was an entirely different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algernon, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner first. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. Nobody ever does. Well, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
Oh, the sooner you put that nonsense from your mind, the better. I made arrangements myself to be christened at... This morning, I made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30. And I naturally will take the name of Ernest, because Gwendolyn would wish it. You can't both be called Ernest, that would be absurd. Besides, I have the perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence I've ever been christened by anybody. Indeed, I should think it highly probable I never was. It's entirely different in your case. You've already been christened.
Yes, but I've not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened.
Quite so, so I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not sure about ever having been christened, I think it very dangerous you're venturing onto it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Now that is nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There's only one left, and I told you I'm particularly fond of muffins.
But I don't like tea cake.
Well, then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What idea do you have on hospitality?
Algernon, I've already asked you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
Because I haven't finished my tea yet, and there's still one muffin left.
Well,
ushered once into the house, as anybody else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
Well, they are eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Yes, it's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to be producing an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a very satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have the opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Sir?
I have the greatest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German scepticism. Their explanations seem quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
Oh, I'm more than happy with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
So you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. I had forgotten there are principles at stake which one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we're going to be Christian this afternoon.
For my sake, you're prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to speak of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
Well, they have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling,
Lady Bracknell. Good heavens.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
merely, Mamma, that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing.
Come here. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. An unhappy father is, I'm glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. In fact, I've never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But you must clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment, on this point as on all points. I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. As regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
No, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury's elsewhere at present. In fact, Bunbury's dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Yes, I killed him. He died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury. No, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I had no idea that Mr. Bunbury was remotely interested in social legislation. If so, he will punish for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean that Bunbury was found out. I mean the doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, is what I mean. So, Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physician. However, I'm glad to hear that at the last he made up his mind to take some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we've got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon seems to be holding in a very peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire. But the number of engagements that take place seem to me to be far above the proper average. The statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think a few preliminary inquiries on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew remotely connected to any of the larger railway stations in London? I desire merely for information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any persons or families whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, 149 Belgrave Square, London, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That does not sound unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. For what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that particular publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I have been told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Very kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with instant, I see. It's somewhat rather too exciting for a young girl. I disapprove of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolen, the time has come for our departure. We've not a moment to lose. I suppose, as a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I ought to ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
About £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present age have any of the really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last or improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair is as nature might have left it. But a thoroughly experienced French maid can produce marvellous results in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to the young lady Lancing, and in 3 months her own husband didn't know her.
After 6 months, nobody knew.
Kindly turn round for me, dear. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 things lacking in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn, and it is worn very high at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily's the dearest, sweetest, prettiest girl in the world. I don't care tuppence for social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Now, my dear Cecily, for you understand that Algernon has nothing to depend upon aside from his sex. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I did not let that stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent to the marriage.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
You may kiss me, Cecily.
Lady Bracknell.
And you may address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I think the marriage had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I do not approve of long engagements. There are people time to get to know each other's character before marriage, which I never think is advised.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell. I'm afraid this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot get married without my consent. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an exceptionally, I might even say ostentatiously, eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
Pains me to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but I'm afraid I do not approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He went to Oxford.
Afraid there can be little doubt on the matter. This morning, during my temporary absence in London, on a question of romance, he obtained admission to my home under the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he then consumed, I have been informed by my butler, a pint of my Perrier Jouet, Brut 89, a wine I was expressly reserving for myself. Continuing with this dreadful deception, during the course of the afternoon, he alienated the affections of my only ward. Subsequently, staying for tea, he devoured every single muffin. What makes his actions all the more harmless is that he knew perfectly well from the first that I have no brother. I've never had a brother, and I don't intend to have a brother. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday.
After careful consideration, Mr. Worthing, I have decided to forgive my nephew's conduct towards you.
That's very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. However, my own decision is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Cecily, dear, how old are you?
Well, I'm really only 18. But I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
You are quite right to make some slight alteration about your age. A woman should never be completely accurate about her age. It makes one look so calculating. 18, but admitted to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be long before you do come of age, and will thus be freed from the restraints of tutelage. I therefore consider that your guardian's consent is of no importance.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but I feel it is only fair to inform you that under the terms of Miss Cardew's grandfather's will, she does not come legally of age until she is 35.
There does not seem to be to raise any grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. While London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have of their own free choice remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbledore is an instance in point. She has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see nothing to suggest that our dear Cecily may not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait to be married until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even for 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
But what can we do, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew positively states that she cannot possibly wait until the age of 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature. I would beg you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will happily allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must know that what you propose is completely out of the question.
Then I suggest a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not what I had in mind for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can make up his own mind. And Gwendolen, we have missed 5, if not 6 trains already. To miss any more will expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christening, dear.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed an immediate desire for baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. I'm sure Lord Bracknell will be most displeased to hear that is how you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think, as things are now, it would be of any practical value to either one of us, Dr. Chasuble.
Oh, I'm grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing, the saviour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in one of my unpublished sermons. However, as your mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I shall return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the bureau that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention Miss Prism?
Yes, Miss Bracknell, I am on my way to join her now.
May I detain you for a moment, sir? This matter may be of vital importance to myself and Lord Bracknell. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected to education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask you, sir, what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the past 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Well, in spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
Ah, she approaches, she is mine.
I was told you were expecting me in the vestry, dear Karen. I have been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left the house of Lord Bracknell, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Square, in charge of a perambulator containing a child of the male sex. You never returned. 2 weeks later, after the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered standing by itself at midnight in a remote corner of Bayswater, containing a 3-volumed manuscript of a novel of unusually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that bag?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish that I did. Plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that will be forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. But I also had with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag, in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I'll never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet, and I placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh, Mr. Worthing, do not ask me!
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I must know where you deposited that handbag that contained the baby.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait for me here.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think all this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of the highest position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. It is hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
No, your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is indeed unpleasant. It's sad to say we're having an argument, and I dislike arguments. They're vulgar and often convincing.
Ah, it has stopped.
I do wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it lasts.
Is this the handbag? Examine it carefully. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
Yes, it seems to be mine. Oh yes, here is the injury it sustained through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an occurrence that happened at Leamington. Oh, and here, on the lock are the initials. Oh, I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. Oh, yes, the bag is undoubtedly mine, and I am so delighted to have it unexpectedly restored to me. It has been quite a terrible problem being without it all these years.
Or it's restored to you from the handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother!
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried!
Unmarried? I do not deny that it's a serious blow. However, who can cast the first stone against one who has suffered so? Cannot repentance wipe out a single act of folly? Why should there be one law for man and another for woman? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there seems to be some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell. I hate to seem inquisitive. But would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid to say that what I have to tell you may not altogether please you. You are the firstborn of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother. And I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. Cecily, how could you doubt it? I have a brother! Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Mr. Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother! Algy, you young scoundrel! God, you treat me with more respect from now on. You've never behaved to me like a brother in your life.
Not until today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, but I was a bit out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Heavens, I've quite forgotten that point. I suppose your decision upon my name is irrevocable.
I never change except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
The matter had better be settled at once. Uncle Gaster, a moment. At the time Miss Prism deposited me in the handbag, had I already been christened?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
And I had been christened, that settles it. What name had I been given? Let me know the worst.
Well, being the firstborn and a son, you were named after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot recall at present what the General's Christian name was. I'm sure that he had one. He was rather eccentric. Well, only later in life. That was due to the Indian climate, and indigestion, and marriage, and other things of that sort.
Angela, can you not recall our father's Christian name?
Hardly, old boy. We were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose.
Well, the General was essentially a man of peace, aside from his domestic life. But I'm sure his name would appear in any military directory.
I mean, this last 40 years, this delightful volume should have been my constant study. Generals. Malum, Maxwell, Magley, what ghastly names they all have. Markley, Ligsby, Mond, Moncrief. Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel. Colonel. General, 1869. Christian names. Ernest John. I was told you, Gwendolyn, that my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the General's Christian name was Ernest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking that name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first you could have no other name.
It's a terrible thing for a man to suddenly find out that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Forgive me.
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
No, Mum.
Laetitia!
Frederick! At last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta. For the first time in my life, I have realized the vital importance of being earnest.